When you have a family and you are one keystroke away from being separated from your savings, that's a very dangerous position to be in, especially in the UK and Australia. You had an exorbitant privilege over everybody else in society. Would you ever fund education and transparency around the dangers of somebody having exorbitant privilege in the system? You guys have it really tough. You're on the receiving end of the accumulation of abuses by the state of the money printer. I imagine a lot of Gen Z, they don't see a future in 50 years like their grandparents. There is no way to save. There is no way to save. And so what do? You give up saving. Like, it's just logical, you give up saving. It's like, what's the point? Why do people play the lottery? It's not because they think they're going to win. It's the chance that they might, because there's no other path. And for many, it's the only way their life will materially change. It's amazing. It's the very first time in your life you'll have actually owned something. Everything else can get taken away from you.
Our generation are one of the most shafted generation, but also have the brightest. Welcome back to the show. Today we're joined by Joe Bryan, the creator of What's the Problem? This video is what I wish I had at 18, and one that I hope as many Gen Z as possible can access sooner rather than later. This won't be a recap of his video. I'll make sure to drop that in the description, but a conversation around it. Joe, welcome to the show. How are you doing?
Yeah, good. Thanks, Finn. Thank you for having me on.
Yeah, it's awesome to have you on. I want to get straight into it. So why do you think the core ideas of your video, the real mechanics around the money system, are not taught in school, by uni, known or taught by parents?
I think it's inevitable that they're not. I mean, if you had, just think about a setup where you had an exorbitant privilege over everybody else in society, and that exorbitant privilege allowed you to fund whatever you wanted to fund and make your area of control across society ever greater, including education. Would you ever fund education and transparency around the dangers of somebody having exorbitant privilege in the system? No, I mean, you absolutely wouldn't. You would actively promote the exact opposite. You would embrace an economic school of thought and an education system that glorified the need for inflation and said you can't have a functioning economy or a functioning society without inflation, because inflation is exactly what you get when somebody can print money for free. So if everyone thinks you need it, then no one questions the fact that you can print money for free. And so to think that we would live in a situation where we'd get quality education around the dangers of money printing and the negative consequences that what happens when you do that, when somebody can print it for free, would be nonsensical. So we're exactly where we should be, and inevitably would be when somebody has that privilege. Fortunately, we also have the internet, and the internet allows us to communicate with increasing levels of friction, I should say, freely around the world. And thankfully, there are a material number of people in society that actually have critical thinking capability. Once you understand the problem, or you have spent enough time seeing the small problems and gradually forming a chain of, this causes this, causes this, causes this, you then start to question everything. And it all goes down to the fact that money is corrupted. The money is broken, and that destroys everything. But it's not obvious. It's not obvious and very hard to arrive at unilaterally. It takes some very smart people to infer what is happening and to break it down and make it easier for other people. Thankfully, we've had a lot of those people over the last 15 years, especially around Bitcoin, that have made it more and more accessible to others. And, I was the beneficiary of that great work by many, many people to make it easier for me to connect the dots in my head, right, and to make sense of the world, and then really just put a slightly more accessible layer on the top of it for the next round of people who come across it, right? And then the next people will take what I've done and mix it with other people and make it even more accessible for the next group of people that come along. And eventually, even the people who don't have a particularly strong critical thinking capability, right? It just doesn't seem meaningful to them, or it doesn't impact their lives or something like that. Even they will get it because it will just become so obvious. It will become ingrained in everything. And therefore, it doesn't matter if you have that exorbitant privilege anymore. If you keep lying to people, but people can realize the truth, and then when they realize the truth, they share that with other people, eventually the lie becomes very obvious to everybody, and your credibility collapses and you lose control. And this is the journey that we're on. We're on with Bitcoin.
I just want to jump in real quick because after a lot of conversations with you guys, it's clear that a lot of you are holding paper Bitcoin. So next Sunday, I'm running a free webinar where you'll be able to find out if you're holding real Bitcoin or you're just holding paper Bitcoin. We'll show you exactly how to assess your current setup, what are the risks, and what to do if you are holding paper Bitcoin. This is a once in a lifetime opportunity where you don't want to be wrong doing the right thing. So if you've been meaning to get your setup secure and safe, where you're operating confidently, the link to register's in the show notes. Save your spot. Look forward to seeing you there, and back to the episode. Yeah, absolutely. And you talk about money printing there. That's basically what's the problem, is talking about the big red button. I have conversations often with people that either don't even realize that money printing is a thing, that it exists. And then I also have people that come at me from the lens of money printing doesn't cause inflation. To these two people, what would your response be beyond watch my video?
Well, definitely do that. Definitely do that. I mean, the first one, money printing absolutely does happen. It absolutely does happen because we have central banks, and the central banks can change the money supply whenever they want through a various set of mechanisms. I mean, they call it different things like quantitative easing, for example, but it's not just the central banks. The central banks are the enabler and are able to print money directly, but the central banks enable the banking system to bring money into existence. And so printing money absolutely does happen at a myriad of different levels in a myriad of different forms, all underwritten by the central bank's ability to create money out of thin air. They openly acknowledge this. I mean, to quote unquote, there's an infinite amount of money at the Federal Reserve. There can only be an infinite amount of money at the Federal Reserve if you can print it for free. And so, but this is not new. Anybody who says money printing doesn't exist has clearly not been paying attention in their history classes through their education. I mean, it happens over and over and over again throughout history. Whenever you have somebody who gets to control the money, they abuse it. Whether it's the Roman emperors, where they debase the coinage, they force people to use the coins, they take them into their mints, they melt them down, they recast them with 10% less gold, and they pocket the difference. They print more coins. They're just printing money. They're debasing the currency. They're reducing the quality of it. Through to the Weimar Republic. You have pictures of people with wheelbarrows full of cash and children playing with stacks of banknotes. Socialist Venezuela, exactly the same thing happens. When somebody can print the money for free, ultimately they will print the money for free and destroy the currency. And we're having exactly the same thing now all over the world. So money printing absolutely does happen. So I don't think that's generally that's a valid question at all. And then the second thing is, does money printing cause inflation? I mean, if you can double the amount of money in circulation in an instant, everything that is not printable in an instant goes up in value when measured in the money. Just obviously, if the thing you price everything in becomes twice as plentiful, why would anybody sell you something they own for the same price as yesterday? They wouldn't. They'd be like, well, there's twice the amount of money in circulation now. It's at least twice the price. It's probably more than twice the price. And more than twice the price because if you doubled the amount of money overnight yesterday, you're probably going to do the same thing tonight, right? So why would I want the paper? So now you've got to pay me 3 times the amount. Because as soon as I get the paper, I've got to get rid of the paper and buy something you can't print. And so, I mean, fundamentally, we all know that inflation is is from money printing. Again, just need to look at history. Like a loaf of bread costs a wheelbarrow of cash. It's because they printed money. It's no different now. It's just in a different form. They get to print it by pressing a keyboard, right? And it zeros on some ledger somewhere. So it's not very visible. Like we don't have the smack you in the face, like cash lying in bushes because it's worthless and people don't pick it up. It's all digital now, which means it's hidden, but it's also at a slower pace than it has been in the past generally, but it's accelerated. And people can feel the consequences of it all around themselves. But it absolutely causes inflation. It's the sole driver of inflation. Because the world is naturally deflationary. And so, I would, if somebody says money printing doesn't cause inflation, then you should say to them, okay, well, what happens when you don't print money? What happens when you don't allow the state to grow incessantly because it can print money? Then what happens? Well, people have a lot more freedom because the state is not ever growing, interacting and setting rules and regulations everywhere, creating friction for commerce. So in a scenario where the state is reduced because they haven't been able to grow egregiously and no one can print money for free, then you restore a free market or more of a free market. And when you have a free market, people compete with each other. But no one's forced to buy from anybody, or no one is protected from competition. And because you're not printing money for free, you're able to accrue savings, make investments, make long-term decisions. And the combination of those things mean that prices start to fall. Because if your prices are too high, it's a signal to everybody else that your profitability is too high. They'll come and compete with you. And they'll deliver what you're delivering at a cheaper price and a higher quality, and you'll lose customers. So there's this constant pressure to be more competitive. And no one is insulated from competition. And so, of course, prices start to fall. How could it be any other way? So deflation is the natural state of the world when you leave people alone, right? And they have good money. So if that is the natural state of the world, it's 180 degrees opposite from the state of the world that we experience, where it's just like prices constantly going up and quality constantly deteriorating. It's like, okay, explain to me that, like, how we're not in the world that should exist and how we are in the world that we are today. It's because they're printing money. They're destroying the free market. So the prices stop falling because everyone's pulled closer and closer to the government. And they're printing more money on top. And so they're debasing the currency. So the prices just go up forever. It's just money printing. It's just money printing. So yeah, neither of them hold any water, and should be roundly quashed if people raise them as genuine criticisms.
Yeah, you've just well and truly squashed them for anyone that's having these thoughts. But one thing you've said in your answer and right at the start was these things are subtle. So unless people are critically thinking and really questioning things, it can just go without them realizing a lot of these things if they're not actively looking around. So for everyone, but Gen Z in particular, my generation, what kind of things could they be feeling right now that could perhaps then, if they start realizing they're feeling these things, encourage them to go and look a bit deeper, think a bit more critically?
Good question. And I can't pretend to understand how Gen Z feels because, I'm no longer Gen Z, but you guys have it really tough. You're on the receiving end of the accumulation of abuses by the state of the money printer. And, we're talking here about printing money. We're not talking about the corruption of the money when it comes to self-sovereignty, etc. as well, which is another aspect, which, maybe we'll touch on later, but purely just the quantity of money means that I imagine a lot of Gen Z feel like they perhaps don't feel like they don't see a future in 50 years like their grandparents. It's much more short-term focused. Whereas, 50 years ago, you would be in your early 20s thinking about getting married, having a family, planning for the future, buying a house, settling down, building a home together, and thinking about the long term. Whereas now everything's just much more short term focused, because the chances of you in your early 20s being able to feel like you can ever buy a house significantly reduced, because the houses are incredibly expensive and your ability to earn is severely hampered unless you go through, accreditation after accreditation after accreditation, and you work your way up through whatever corporate ladder, however many years it takes, and you both need to do it, or else you can't buy the house, right? Because you have to borrow so much money to buy the house. Because if you both need to do it, then you can't have children anytime soon. It's like, we'll wait till we're in our mid-30s and then we'll have children, which means that you're sacrificing your most productive time for having children to a point where, we're not designed to be having children in our 30s, as we should be having children a lot earlier and bigger families. But we don't, because the money's broken. It's corrupted everything. And so if you don't feel invested in the future long term, you make shorter decisions, you prioritize not sacrificing for that long term. It's like, let's just go on holiday. Let's not bother saving, because there's no point saving. I'm never going to buy a house. And if I do put money in the bank to try and save up a deposit or to invest in the future, it deteriorates. It melts. It melts, like the purchasing power goes down every year. So I can't put money in the bank. So basically, I've got to speculate with it. I've got to speculate with it to try and protect the purchasing power that I received in exchange for my life. I went and did a day's work. They gave me the money. I put it in the bank, and now they're going to steal it. So they steal half of it up front. And then every year they're going to steal another 8 to 10% of it by pushing the prices up of everything. And even the paltry level of interest I'll get on the bank account will vastly underperform the 8 to 10%. And then I'll get taxed on that as well. There is no way to save. There is no way to save. And so what do? You give up saving. Like, it's just logical. You give up saving. It's like, what's the point? I'll go and live an enjoyable life short term, which means 20 years out, you're not married, you haven't got children, or you're married and don't have children, or you're divorced and don't have children. And then at that point, you're looking ahead to a life where you're never going to be able to retire. Because the pension system's entirely broken. You're working those 20 years, not having children, sacrificing your life to pay the government through one door, and they send it straight out the other door to the people who are 20, 30 years ahead of you on the treadmill, who haven't been impacted haven't been impacted negatively to the same degree. They managed to buy some assets cheaper, which have been inflated. They have a higher quality of life. They don't have to work. But you have to work to keep the system running. But by the time you get there, that second door will be closed, because the government pension system doesn't work. They've robbed it. They've either closed the doors to the state pension system no longer exists, or they've pushed back the retirement age so far and crippled the purchasing power of what you get when you retire to such a degree that it's worthless anyway. You guys have just been absolutely stuffed. Absolutely stuffed. Right. And so against that backdrop, is it any question? Is there any, is it any wonder why Gen Z appear to everyone else to be this generation that doesn't really care?
The lost generation.
It's entirely logical, because they've been screwed, totally screwed. And the only way you guys have to try and leapfrog out of this path of decline is to take massive risk in something, is to try and, this again, it's part of the reason, like, why people are attracted to, meme coins and all of this nonsense. It's because it's like buying a lottery ticket. It's like, why do people play the lottery? It's not because they think they're going to win. It's the chance that they might. And for many, it's the only way their life will materially change, because there's no other path. It's 1,000,000 to 1, right? But I'll keep playing, because if I don't play, my life is never going to change. And it's the same thing with Gen Z, I would imagine. It's like, speculative assets, but they're unproductive and they're always at the expense of somebody else. And so it's not adding to society in any way. It's adding to the short-term impact of society. But it all comes back to the money. If the money's broken, it just destroys everything. And you guys are on the biggest receiving end of everybody so far. But I tell you what, you're in a better position than the children today.
It's going to get tough. And a lot of what you just explained there sounds very much like a Ponzi scheme. A lot of the things you were talking about. So if I put it back to you and we imagine that you are Gen Z, you're 20 to 25, but you know what you know, what are the kind of things that you'd be trying to do to get ahead and to protect yourself and your family and to start living a better future?
The very first thing I would do would be to watch what's the problem. Watch what's the problem and understand what is happening. Because unless you understand what is happening, you can't protect yourself. You can't protect your family. Once you do understand it, then you can take control of your life again and make those productive steps that you feel like you have a set of foundations that you can build your life upon. Without it, you are just drifting. You're drifting. Once you understand what the problem is, you can then chart a path to protecting yourself long term. Now, once the penny drops that they're going to print money forever, and that when they print money forever, the currency is going to zero, it changes everything about the way that you live your life and the decisions that you make. You understand why you can't save Aussie dollars or British pounds. It's because they're going to zero, and it's deliberate they're going to zero. So you can't save in them. Okay. So what begs the next question? Okay, what can I save in? Or what should I save in? And that's one consideration. The second consideration is, and this is the other aspect of the corruption of money. There's a third one coming down the pipe soon, but the second one right now is you don't actually own the money anyway. You don't own the assets anyway. And it's these two axes. We can explore a bit more there. But once you realize you're getting screwed, you say, how do I stop getting screwed? I need to figure out what to own other than the monopoly money they pay me in. And I need to own something I actually own. And it's those two things that you're solving for. And so you'll go through this chain of thinking of like, if they're printing money, I want to own something that they can't print. So I'll buy the stock market, or I'll buy shares, or I'll buy a property if I've got enough savings. But it's basically anything which is a better store of value than the money. And as you examine each of these things, some are easier to buy than others. Some are a better proxy store of value than others. Some come with additional headaches like maintenance of a house, or the rapidly changing property taxes associated with a house, or the tax deductible nature of interest on a house, all these different things. Then you sort of hop along this journey of like trying to solve for the thing that stores the value the most and the thing that I can actually own. And you go like housing to gold, something else, blah, 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 Bitcoin. Both of those axes, Bitcoin is the apex because nobody can print it. Absolutely nobody can print it. And you absolutely own it if you take self-custody of it. Like, it's the only thing you can own. And it's the only thing nobody else can produce, regardless of the level of demand. And so you go from the bottom left-hand corner of the matrix, which is the thing they can always print and the thing you don't own at all, to the thing in the top right-hand corner of the matrix is the thing no one can print and only I own. It's like polar opposites. Everything else is somewhere in between on that matrix with trade-offs. But once you understand why, it then just becomes an inevitable journey to you realize Bitcoin is the apex on both of those axes. So that's like from a super high level perspective. From a more practical perspective, once you've watched what's the problem, once you've realized you need to take control and protect yourself, is then start learning about it. Don't don't go and buy Bitcoin. Don't buy Bitcoin. Go and learn about it. Understand why you need Bitcoin. Understand the risks and the trade-offs. We're early from a user experience perspective. Like, it's not easy. It will be easy. And every day it becomes easier, but it's not easy. And you need to understand why you own it, because it's also volatile. But it has to be volatile. That's a good thing. But because it's volatile, it can go up a lot, it can go down a lot. But when you zoom out, you've always just got to remember you're measuring it in the thing they're going to print forever. They're going to print it forever. And so, yeah, learning about it as well. And then only when you're comfortable, once you really understand it, make your own decision about whether you should buy a little bit of it. Buy a little bit, start to play with it, send a transaction to yourself, figure out how to take self-custody. Like, that's quite a scary moment. The very first time, like, there's no safety net. But it's amazing. It's the very first time in your life you'll have actually owned something. Everything else can get taken away from you. It's the only thing you can actually own. But yeah, it's a long journey of learning. It's a never-ending journey of learning. But for Gen Z, like, I'm very envious of you guys in a lot of ways, because you've got an extra 20 years. And, like, the conversation we've had here, Finn, so far, like, could be quite depressive, right? If you're Gen Z, like, I'm screwed. I'm stuffed. And that's true unless you do something about it, right? But if you decide to do something about it, you are in an incredible position, because it's just like being in the 90s and realizing the internet is going to be this massive thing, and being like 20 to 25. It was all like, in your 20s, be like, oh crap, there is this massive opportunity here. This thing is going to eat the world over the next 20, 30 years, and nobody has worked it out yet. That's the opportunity for you guys, which is amazing, absolutely amazing. And so if you figure out, get comfortable with why, and then you start to embrace Bitcoin into your life in various different ways. You already know, Finn, because we had a chat before, like, your mindset's already changing because of Bitcoin. You're making different decisions in your life because of Bitcoin. You feel like you have more control over the future because of Bitcoin. That will happen to everybody. And it's incredibly empowering, especially when you're in your 20s and you have an incredible amount of freedom. I don't mean freedom from the state. I mean freedom in terms of the decision-making pathways you have ahead of yourself. It's like you're at the start of, even 16, 17 years in, you're at the start of like the greatest secular trend for the next 50 years. 99% of the population have no idea. Like, that's a massive competitive advantage in whatever area of being in the top 1%. Has massive upside advantage if you press home that advantage.
Yeah. And I was going to take it a different direction, but I want to continue on this direction to bring some positivity to the episode. But what does that future look like for people that potentially are struggling right now, that what's the problem? They start taking action on the solutions to the problem. What can their life start looking like, as opposed to what it looks like now and the direction it's heading if they keep on that path?
Yeah. Okay. But there's several ways to answer that. I mean, the first is putting aside any value change in Bitcoin. When you empower somebody, when someone feels like they have control over their own life and the decision making, even if they're in a tough spot, they're far more positive than if they feel like they're helpless, right? So Bitcoin is as much a psychological change as it is a monetary change. You will feel incredibly motivated once the penny drops, because it doesn't have to be this way. There is a better way. There is a better way, and everybody's going to figure that out. So that's the first thing. The second thing is, like, monetarily, you see, my view is that Bitcoin eats the whole world. It gradually and then rapidly displaces the weaker fiat currencies and becomes the global store of value, ultimately the money of the world. If that happens, you never need to sell the Bitcoin, because it just becomes the money. And so, if you subscribe to a future like that, as I do, then Bitcoin is on that matrix of the thing no one can print and the thing you absolutely own. It allows you to restore your self-sovereignty, take control of your life, but also protect you from the abuses of the money printer over time, which means that when you go out and do a day's work, you still have to pay the tax on day one. There's no avoiding that unless you choose to leave the country, and even then that's harder. But then on day two, no one's stealing from you anymore. When they continue to print the money at 8 to 10% a year, it's no longer affecting you because you're not storing your wealth in their money. You're storing your wealth in the people's money, in the thing they can't print. And over time, that enables you to grow savings that harness the productivity of everybody around the world as the adoption of Bitcoin gradually takes hold. And Bitcoin unlocks a global free market. There's no borders with Bitcoin. And, ultimately Bitcoin is going through a combination of two different cycles at the same time. One is the adoption cycle. It's like the adoption curve of a new technology, and we're very, very early in that, like the microwave or the fridge freezer or the internet. All of these things are S curves. You have the early adopters, and then you have the early majority and the majority, and then the laggards. Like they all follow the same shape because they're not mandated by a government. It's like free market adoption. So we're very early on that process. But at the same time, this isn't just a technology you adopt like a microwave or a fridge freezer. This is the money. And so you have a monetization curve as well, which is similarly S-shaped. And Bitcoin represents 0.2% of everything. 0.2% of everything, right? After 17 years. And so if you subscribe to Bitcoin becoming the money of the world in the future, not going to be 0.2% of everything. It's going to be the majority of everything, or probably half of everything. And the other half being the assets. That is a long way to go, especially when you remember the total value of everything's measured in the thing they're going to print forever. So the dollar's going to zero, the euro's going to zero, the Aussie dollar's going to zero in purchasing power. So everything's going to infinity when measured in it. But some things are going to go there a lot faster because your frame of reference is changing. And so if you've got this adoption curve on the technology, you've got the monetization curve, and in parallel, you've got this psychological reset that happens when you embrace Bitcoin. You're set up for a personal reinvigoration and the monetary reinvigoration, which allows you to then plan for the future with confidence. Long-term future, not short-term, because Bitcoin's volatile, but long-term future. And think about the improvement in your decision making that then comes from that. You're making better decisions on more solid foundations, and those decisions compound over time. And so you can save. You can buy a house. You can save. You can build a business. You can save. You can have a family earlier. Your wife can take time off work to have children, to stay at home with the children, because you've accumulated your economic energy. Your economic battery has been expanding rather than melting over time. And all the while, you are driving further adoption because you're explaining to other people what the problems are with the system, right? But it doesn't have to be this way. And no one's going back. Like once you change, you're never going to go back to thinking fiat works, right? You're just going to talk to more people, and eventually everybody figures it out. It's a one-way door. And so you guys are really set up amazingly well if you choose to take advantage of it, right? But you need to understand why you're doing it and do it for the right reasons with the right long-term outlook.
Yeah, it's an amazing answer, and one that hopefully prompts people to ask a bunch of questions and start looking or critically thinking. And I agree that our generation are one of the most shafted generation, but also have the brightest future ahead when these things do start clicking. And I've said from the start, those that have been saving, although they're not getting very far ahead because saving doesn't get you anywhere, but for those that are saving for a house or whatever they may be, if they can start getting this to click, they've already got a decent amount of fiat to get some Bitcoin. But like you said, they need to understand what they're holding. And I'm mindful of the time, so I just want to touch on one last thing because obviously number go up is a great marketing tool and it's a perk to Bitcoin. You become wealthier over time. But in my opinion, the biggest value propositions of Bitcoin that you touched on multiple times is you can own it. What does you mean when you say you can own your Bitcoin? And why is that so important? Because as we both know, you can buy Bitcoin and still not own it. So what does it mean by owning your Bitcoin, and why is that so important in the world we're currently living in?
So I'd ask you to think about this point. If money didn't exist, if it didn't exist at all, and you and I decided, right, we should create this thing called money, right? It would just make commerce so much easier, right? We absolutely would not design it with the feature that you couldn't hold it yourself. You can have this money, but you can't actually hold it. You've got to give it to someone else to look after for you. I mean, that would be just nonsensical, wouldn't it? I mean, so obviously ludicrous.
Yeah, it's crazy.
It's great. And so, but that's the world we live in. But we take that for granted. Like there is no way other than having physical cash that you can control the money yourself or own the money yourself. And you wonder why there's a war on cash, right? That cash is going to disappear. It's because it's the only way that you can have the money yourself, where you can then transact freely with somebody else with no middleman and with no permission. Nobody is sat in the middle saying that's a valid transaction. And no one's sat in the middle monetizing the transaction, taking a small fee from one of you. But it's been eradicated. And now everything's going to be digital. It's going to be digital, and that's going to be weaponized with the CBDC as well at some point. Now, this is just clearly bonkers. So when you do a day's work and you get paid, you don't even get the money. The money goes to the bank, right? And you can access it if the bank says you can, and the government says you can. Either one of those two says no, you don't access the money. So it's not yours. It's yours with permission. It's like you are a child and you can have the money if both the parents say yes, even though you're the one working for it. That's a very precarious position to be in. When you have a family and you are one keystroke away from being separated from your savings, that's a very dangerous position to be in. Okay. Especially in the UK and Australia these days. We have been overtaken with lunacy from the state. Absolute lunacy, where facts don't matter, truth doesn't matter. It's all about feelings and make believe, right? And it's about protecting the state. So if you're critical of the state, you're critical of decision making, you question motives, you question corruption, any of these things, you risk putting yourself in a precarious position where they say, sorry, you can't access your money anymore. And this isn't like some extreme thing. This is happening to like everyday people. And everyone listening knows that the direction of travel here is not a good one. Things are rapidly becoming worse, not better. And so whether you think today that affects you or not, if you look forward a year, 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, probably does. You'll end up watching what you say, watching what you do. We're on a slippery slope. We're on a slippery slope here. And when you're on that slippery slope, you don't want to risk everything on the goodwill of the state. And so if you were going to design perfect money, you'd hold it yourself. Like you wouldn't get someone else to hold it for you. And so you should just be able to hold the money yourself. Bitcoin, you can hold it yourself. I don't need anyone's permission to send or receive it or access it, do whatever I choose to do with it. Send it to anyone in the world at any time, instantly, at like zero cost. Why would I want a bank? Why would I want the bank sat in the middle and monetizing me and monetizing the people I do business with? No, I absolutely don't. Absolutely don't. And so the self-sovereignty piece is equally important as the value piece, because if it wasn't self-sovereign, it wouldn't be valuable. It would just be fiat. You can make something limited in supply But if I require someone's permission, I'm still stuck. It needs to be limited in supply, bounded by energy, and be entirely permissionless. That's Bitcoin. And so, yeah, I hope that answers the question. One thing I would add, and just the final point that you mentioned, with even when you buy Bitcoin, you don't actually don't really own Bitcoin, is true for almost everybody who buys Bitcoin, because the easiest way to buy Bitcoin is on an exchange, or not via person to person. Right? It's normally like you set up an account somewhere, you do some KYC, you deposit your Aussie dollars or your pounds, you buy some Bitcoin. And then because you exist in this mental model world of I can't keep the money myself, you just leave it on the exchange where you bought it. You treat it like a Bitcoin bank account almost, which makes it pointless because it's just like having the money in the bank. The Bitcoin is only yours if the exchange says yes and the government says yes. You don't even know whether the exchange actually bought the Bitcoin when you bought it, right? You just see it in your account. The only way for you to actually own the Bitcoin is to take it yourself. So if the exchange goes bust and you have Bitcoin on the exchange, you lose it because it's not yours. It's like when you have money in the bank, that's not yours. If the bank goes bust, that disappears. You've made a loan to the bank. That's all the deposit is. You've made a loan to the bank. You're a creditor. It's the same with Bitcoin on exchange. So unless you hold it yourself, unless you take self-custody, it is not real. And you don't actually own Bitcoin. You own a promise to the economic exposure to Bitcoin if the exchange you bought it from doesn't go bust. That's what you own.
Yeah, that's a great way to finish. I think we'll leave it there. Joe, thanks so much for jumping on, man. I've really enjoyed this. And for anyone that's watching that is resonating with your message, just like I did, where can they find you? Where can they find What's the Problem, and what steps should they be taking?
Go to what'stheproblem.org. So fairly easy to find, or just Google What's the Problem. You'll see it there like a little Pixar character on Google. Watch that. And then at the end of the video, there's direction to some follow-up resources so you can start to learn about Bitcoin yourself. And this isn't about saying anyone should trust what I'm saying or trying to get them to buy Bitcoin or anything like that. It's not. It's trying to get people to recognize that there's a problem, a core problem at the heart of all the problems they experience in their life. And once that penny drop moment happens, it's on you to then start learning about it, thinking about it, doing your own critical thinking, ultimately making your own decision. But don't trust me. Verify it yourself. I'm on X, so Satmo Joe, SATMOJOE, and I'm on LinkedIn as well for people still in the fiat world. I hope it's been helpful to people.
Awesome. I hope it has too. Thanks so much for jumping on. I'll put all of that in the show notes for everyone that's watching. Joe, thanks again. Guys, we'll see you on the next one.